Welcome back, Cannabis Conversations Part 2 with Megan, the Trusted Canna Nurse, and Dr. Cody. We are having a blast here. If you haven't seen Part 1, remember, pause, go back, watch Part 1, give yourself some context for Part 2, because Part 2 is it's going to be awesome, because we're going to be talking about something that's important to consumers. But what's really important for me, first of all, is getting out of the way. Our sponsors, Fat Nugs Magazine, we love you. Thank you so much for helping us sponsor these episodes, being a part of this growth. Without Dustin, I probably wouldn't have this show. He's someone who really led me in. More Fat Nugs. And right now, Fat Nugs, Beard Brothers, Freedom Grow, and Jail for Weed are working on maybe the most important edition of this magazine ever in the Freedom, in the prisoner edition. And it's going to spotlight current and past cannabis prisoners and their stories. Because at the end of the day, no one, and we mean no one, should be in jail for this plan. Thank you both for coming back for Part 2. Here we go. So normally I let you lead off Part 2, but because of the way Part 1 ended, and we had to come together on a concept, which I like. You two are very involved in a I don't know, let's call it a hot topic on LinkedIn, okay? Because that's all that I am on, okay? So that's where I am personally.
That's your social media.
Yes, my nephews tell me I'm on the old person social. That's fine. The show is broadcast everywhere, though, so don't sell yourself short. You can find Instagram, TikTok, all the places you do your podcasting. But the discussion of CHS, I told you guys this in the mid-show. As a consumer, I have no real idea what you're all talking about. But I feel like I need to. I feel like I need to be more informed. And I can tell you that our audience probably needs to be informed as well, because I think we have enough acronyms in our lives to choke us. And so without clarity of acronym, I feel lost. Who wants to kick off the clarity of the acronym as well as a quick overview of exactly their position, not their position, but what the discussion is about at the basic level?
I can give the overview, and Cody jump in the details. So CHS, when we're talking about it, stands for Cannabis or Cannabinoid Hyperemesis Syndrome. And this is this phenomenon that we see in long-term and or heavy cannabis THC users, where they experience these bouts of cyclic nausea, vomiting, combined with really severe abdominal pain, oftentimes relieved with hot bathing, these episodes. And there's often this prodrome period that before they even get to the vomiting episode, maybe for a few months or even a few years, they wake up kind of feeling this like general malaise, feeling like shit. Maybe they're nauseous. Maybe they even throw up a little bit. And cannabis sometimes helps relieve that nausea in the morning. And then usually eventually it gets to this severe period of severe nausea and vomiting. Oftentimes lands people in the hospital. A few cases that they've had complications, related to severe dehydration, organ failure, that some people have passed indirectly related to cannabis and CHS.
Which is scary, because we talk about how weed has never killed anyone, and that's true directly, right? But indirectly, there's an increasing concern that if unaddressed, that CHS could lead to this. And there are case reports documented in the literature and many more anecdotal reports of people, this sort of being the condition that pushed them over the edge and they did lose their lives. But I don't want to be alarmist, and I really want to back Megan up so that we can break down the name and correlate it to everything she just said.
Well, good, because I am not an alarmist. I am not someone who likes to buy into a headline or a clickbait there. But this discussion is something important, because you just basically read out my demographic, right? You know what I mean? Guy who's been smoking a long time and has been involved in that. Now, I haven't gone through that. I haven't experienced anything like this. But I can tell you that the first thing I thought of, Cody, the first thing I thought of was the words you just said was, wait a second. We've never killed anybody. What am I talking about here? How did I arrive at this juncture of our lives? And I think it's because there's just more people using. I think there's more widespread acceptance for people to start having those discussions. So to me, I see it as a positive that we're going in this direction. I'm sure advocates at the plant may tell me, oh, this isn't good. Well, I think, again, I'm a huge sports fan, and I'm a baseball fan. And in baseball, if you do your job right 30% of the time, you could be considered the greatest of your game. So the margin of error for people to fuck up for me, if you're running at 100% or 90%, I don't believe you. I just don't. So,
You're just
so
having a
let's
good
not
game.
let's not just be that specific. Let's open it up. So, Cody, tell us more about why we should just not be alarmist, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be aware and stick our fucking head in the sand.
We need to care about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is a problem. We need to understand who's at risk and what it is. But let's break down the name a little bit more. CHS, cannabinoid. Inside of cannabis, the cannabinoids are the moneymaker. These are the masterful molecules that we know and love. That's THC, CBD, and a litany more. THCA, CBG, CBGA, CBC, THCV, blah, 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 blah. There's hundreds of them, okay? And they're a bunch of acronyms that we don't want to get lost. But those are the cannabinoids. It's what makes cannabis special. Cannabis makes these molecules prolifically. We like that, when we keep the females away from the males, they just produce more and more of them. And so cannabinoids are awesome. I've been consuming them since college, as you learned in part 1. However, there does seem to be individuals that when they consume over a long period of time, they start to develop vomiting. So that's the second letter, H, hyperemesis or hyperemesis. Now, cannabinoid hyperemesis. So patients who are taking cannabinoids, they develop vomiting. Now, I want to be very clear about this vomiting. This is not, I smoke, so I got too high, or I took an edible, I got too high, and I vomit. Okay? That can happen. That's called nausea, vomiting, and any medicine can cause that. I took a zinc supplement the other day after I was starting to develop a cold. I was in my hometown, and I took that zinc, and I vomited outside of the Walmart. And I apologize to the employee and hope that you have a hose. But I couldn't make it anywhere else. Yeah, I know. I look. It was real classy.
I can see this, Cody, where you're just like, I'm really sorry, but I've totally fucked up your curbside here. Someone needs to rip that off work. It's too cold out here.
Exactly. In Pennsylvania. You're totally right. Okay. So hyperemesis is a lot of vomiting, right? It's not cannabinoid emesis. It's not cannabis vomiting. It's cannabis, a lot of vomiting, hypervomiting. And this is what we call like a hallmark symptom. This is where the condition gets its name. It is intense nausea and vomiting that does not respond to traditional medicines and can continue for hours, days, or even in rare cases, weeks of the inability to stop all day long. And this is not normal, right? We know this is not a normal behavior for THC even. So why is that happening? We don't really know, but we notice that it's occurring in a collection of symptoms. That's syndrome. That's what a syndrome is. It's not a condition. It's not a diagnosis. It's a collection of things that we've named. So we've got a lot of people that smoke a lot of cannabinoids. They're having a lot of vomiting. And then they have this other sort of like stereotypical picture, which includes hot bathing. It includes smoking cannabis almost daily or multiple times a day for an extended period, more than 6 months, often more than a year. We have patients that took our survey. Well, I'll get to that in a second. We asked over 1,000 people. 250 people had smoked for 10 years before developing this condition. And that's a rough number, but that's about what we saw. So we don't know what causes it. Let's start right there. I think you had Trent Hancock on. He's a friend of mine on LinkedIn. That's where I do a lot of my business. Follow me. We had Trent, and I've had a conversation with him. He would say that it's contaminated cannabis. Those people who are consuming cannabis over many years, there's pesticides, there's something different, there's something wrong with that soil, and it's that pesticide that is leading to this vomiting. Because look, marijuana's been around, or cannabis has been around for a million years, or well, not quite that long because humans haven't been here, but tens of thousands of years. And why hasn't this happened before? I don't know. What I do know is it's happening, Sean. I'm on the front lines of emergency medicine in Southern California. And I'm telling you right now, every single week, multiple times usually, I see a patient between the age of 15 and 19 who is healthy, never had any issues before. The only thing, we check everything. We scan, we blast, we check their blood, we do everything. They're normal. The only thing that's happening is they're having uncontrollable vomiting that's unexplained. And they use a vape pen multiple times a day, and or smoke or whatever it might be.
Okay, all right. Well, I was gonna say, Cody, some of that part of it for me, like as an old school guy, vaping, I had to give up on it. I used it initially because of the convenience of it. Because I was like, man, there's a picture my buddies having me. We're big hockey fans, and there's a picture of me walking through the Stanley Cup, just after a victory, just in the middle.
There it is.
huge puff, just, whatever, right? For the Instagram, as it were. And so it was cool. But about 6 months in, I felt like shit. My brain was fogged. My body did not operate the same way. I did not care for what I was doing. Simpler, faster, sure. But I'm a flower kid through and through. And it really fucked with me. It really fucked me. And I felt really sick. So I thought it was a vape thing. So my buddies were always like, hey, vape. I'm like, it doesn't work for me, whatever. So I did think it was that. And when we did have Trent on, he then got me thinking, I only, cough after a hit maybe once every whatever. And it's always after a new batch of something or whatever. And I started to really piece it together. I was like, holy shit. Okay, pesticides could play a bigger role, because I had never thought about it. When we grew a home grow, I didn't have pesticides. We had a home grow. As Trent talks about, you can control your grow at 50 to 100 to 200. It's massive grows where you can't, and you have to use pesticides. So then I started thinking, well, there's no label for that. Like we have certified organic labels for my food, but there's no cannabis label for that. So in my recent visit to Denver, I started to ask, I think bud tenders thought I needed help. It was like, so what do you know about the pesticides? They're like, the what? I'm like, pesticides? This is sprayed plant. It's $80 or whatever. What does that matter? Oh, well, I guess it doesn't matter, right? So it's interesting. Megan, when you see this discussion from your perspective with the CHS, what got you wanting to get involved in it? Had you witnessed it firsthand yourself as well?
Yeah, I see it a lot. So in creating content on social media, that's when I started to see the comments on CHS, and then I started looking into it more, and then learning about it, and then creating content around it, and then just seeing, the echo chambers online of people who have CHS, and those people are demonized by the cannabis industry. They're like, they're blaming the pesticides, they're blaming whatever it is, but they just don't want to blame the THC. And I see the aftermath of the continuous vape use and the continuous dabbing. Our ECS is our, that's our homeostatic system, our balancing system. And you can throw it out of balance with this powerful molecule, right?
Yeah. Just amazing plant medicine.
Yeah, well, that's another takeaway from Megan's speech that I had, where she was just like, look, your body is interacting with 100 of these, and you've got 100 in your own body. And I think she'd even said something to the effect of like, you have cannabinoids in your body without. I'm like, wait, I have what? Like, what do you mean? And she went into the endo part and the education part. You're sort of overwhelmed, as a standard kind of consumer. You're like, okay, holy shit, it's a lot. Like, Cody, again, your posts, when you post them, you have all this fact and data, and you go into the speaking of all that and the literature. I just don't think the majority of people make it there, because I think it's overwhelming to get to the top half of the discussion to even understand it. And Megan, you use the word demonizing. I see it a lot. And I hate that. Again, I know I'm not in the industry. I don't make money here day to day, whatever. I don't care. Here's the point. It's okay to have issue. It's okay to maybe say, some people get sick from THC. We don't have to be batting 1,000 in this game to still have a safe fucking plant that people should use.
Yes, exactly that. So that's totally it. So number one, not every consumer is going to get CHS. We don't know why Snoop Dogg will never develop it. I think it's pretty clear at this point. But some individuals will develop it after a year. But there is evidence from Ethan Russo, who you may have heard of before. He's a well-known scientist in the cannabis space, who's identified genetic correlations between this condition and the vomiting that we're discussing.
Genetic. The other thing we're at a bigger part of the discussion, right, Cody? Now you're sort of past the peripheral into, well, holy shit. Did you know that this could be something that was passed down to you necessarily, whatever it is? That's amazing, but we probably don't have yet the research to get us all the way to the proving point that will make people comfortable with saying it's, fact or fiction.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that we need to do. We need to stop criticizing these patients. We need to get to the bottom of what's causing this. We need to not stigmatize and not chastise people if they do develop this condition. And we need to find tools to give them, because likely they were leaning on cannabis to benefit them, to help them deal with another condition, like their headaches, like their depression, like their anxiety. And
they're a user in the community, yet we act like when they get sick, they don't work here anymore.
Oh, yeah, you're just smoking bad weed. That's exactly what you see.
And again, I'm not going to say pesticides don't play a role in making people sick. I think we would all agree that would not be fair of anyone to say that the amount of pesticides, why eat organic food? At least that's what I hope, right? Because that label's on there. But at the end of the day, we can't actually prove that from a consumer perspective. I just pay the price at the grocery store and trust the label on there. So why is it now that we get into cannabis and people, I mean, I saw one of y'all had a discussion and it just sort of blew up, and people were having, their comments, they were blowing up about it. I thought, what the fuck is this about? Like, why does it need to be criticized that we're trying to figure out what makes people sick from using a plant they think and hope is helping them?
Yep. A plant that's well known to help with nausea. So I think that's number one. But I think what we're really dealing with here, so cannabis helps with nausea. How could it cause nausea? That's the idea. And maybe that's thoughtful, but we remember this is only with chronic use, right? So maybe it's possible that if it helps you at first, after a long time, it's now affecting you. But I think really what we're dealing with, Sean, is quite simple. This is the pendulum of prohibition swinging back. So we went from all cannabis is bad, no one should use it in the 80s to like, oh, it's okay in the 90s. Now we're 2000s. Everybody smokes weed. No one can get hurt by it. Everyone smokes. And I think we're going to fall back to a regular thing where we're all unique. We have a unique disposition. People criticize people too for not liking weed, like, oh, you haven't tried the right cannabis. Some people really are sensitive. They do not do well with THC. Yeah. It's just
the same thing happens with my wife. She doesn't drink, man, at parties. You think she walked in with her fucking pants off. Like, it's crazy to me the way people look at her, where she's like, no, I'm good. And they're like, really? Really? And then she'll say, yeah, I'll be outside smoking a joint. And we're all like, wait, really? Oh my God. Like, I don't understand. And it's crazy. And we were in our 40s. We lived in a medical state in Colorado. We now live in a prohibition state in Wisconsin. It's fucking weird. But again, Cody, you mentioned the prohibition kind of swing here. And I think people think somehow that if these cases get out, well, then maybe they're not going to reschedule us, or maybe they're going to put us in this. Look, at the end of the day, they're going to do whatever they want to do as a federal government. And we aren't aligned yet enough as an industry from the outside looking in to really pull the rope any other way than what they decide. We all have our factions, but there's no pull together. I use the normal consideration. Normal's been around 40 fucking years. Mm-hmm. I mean, we haven't got as much accomplished, I think, as they had hoped and what we had hoped as people, because we just can't collectively agree that whatever this is, we have to find out for the betterment of our community. That's what it's about for me.
I agree.
So, Megan, when you got into this, what is your hope for? I know you guys have been great with your time, so I want to kind of give you some of it back. But what is your hope for this test or this kind of research that the two of you are working on when it all is said and done?
So just to back up, the research that we did was this large, very large, potentially the largest to date survey of individuals with CHS, looking at like the user experience and use patterns, just to see if we can find some sort of pattern and consistencies among users so that we can identify risk factors or potentially diagnostic criteria, maybe an
help
algorithm
doctors figure it out,
to help doctors like in their diagnostics. And what I hope coming from this is that we see what happens, or we see a risk factor of switching from flower to vapes. That is something that we've seen very consistently. I don't want to give numbers or anything, but that's like potentially a huge risk factor.
I could see it. I could already, sitting here talking to the two of you, I can literally go back to how I felt. And it wasn't massive vomiting. It was never vomiting. I'm not a big, that's not my world.
You didn't have CHS.
Right, exactly, Cody. But I'm a high level functioning person. I wake up this way. So if I don't use downers, people think I'm on coke all day. So like I don't use caffeine. This is Sean. So but with vape, I just shrank. I just started to feel really not myself. So again, I think there's negative aspects to how we feel, but that doesn't mean that the whole plant should be bastardized, and it certainly doesn't mean that the human using this plant should it all be demonized. That part sucks.
Yeah, patients, whether people in general, right? They use the cannabis and they find benefit, to then be getting sick from it, and then to have the community ostracize and tell you that you're smoking bad weed and it's just the pesticides and whatever. It's just really demeaning or ostracizing. And I think that we can do better. I really do. We have to do better for patients. Just like just like we have to do better for prisoners. The same reason we need to let prisoners out, we need to support patients. And that can be supporting patients that have a negative effect from cannabis too.
That's a great point. Megan, that's going to lead us into a separate discussion here. Before we get there, do you want to add any more of your passion or points to this CHS discussion?
I will say that it's based on what I've learned, like the pesticide theory is challenging to confirm because like people are using copious amounts of CBD daily, hundreds of milligrams some people are using, and that is a completely unregulated market. So yes, there's clean hemp out there, but you can't tell me that all hemp out there is clean. So if it was the pesticides, I feel like we would see it from CBD users also. But we are in the form of Delta 8, CBD is converted to Delta 8 THC, and we are seeing CHS from people who consume Delta 8.
Because it's
but
that
not
same
from
weird
CBD.
Yeah,
So,
it's that same weird head high, Megan. You know what I mean? Like as a cannabis user, when people send me their hemp, they're like, "Oh, try this hemp blunt." It's about 2 seconds till I'm like, "Nope, this isn't for me," because of the interaction, the way the body feels. That seems to track out for me. And to your point, if it were a pesticide issue, you think you'd see it in a larger number of people, considering how many people actually consume the CBD side of the discussion.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of talk that could go into the pesticide side, but I think one of the most compelling things, and one thing we're going to try to highlight in the study, is we've got people who are solely home grow smokers or tokers, whatever.
Really?
Yeah, just people who grew their own weed or got it from a buddy. And so now you're going to tell me they're riddled with pesticides too? I just don't buy it. I do think you're spot on, and I do think Trent's probably spot on. When you take a bunch of flower and you concentrated it into that vape cart, it carries all the risk of putting all those pesticides in there. So there could be, and not could be, we've got evidence to say there's pesticides in the legal cannabis. But at this time, there is no credible evidence to say it's pesticides that's causing CHS. And I think that's where Megan was going with that.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say that we have two separate issues, and that's okay. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That's okay.
Yeah,
both things can be true.
Right,
Yeah.
Megan, Megan, you agree the pesticide thing is fucked up, right? I mean, we're not sitting here questioning the use of pesticides. Right. So with this, Megan, let me ask you, because I know you've been working really hard on this study as it gets ready. How do you guys release this? How does this come out to the world? I feel like in your world, it has to be like peer reviewed, and I feel like I don't know. So just quickly give us an idea of how and when it came together that way.
I'm going to let Cody answer this because this study is Cody's baby.
Okay, Cody.
Ancillary.
I got lucky enough to become a professor at University of California, Irvine, while I was there and practicing pharmacy in SoCal. I started to see this condition. I asked somebody at the university, "Hey, is there any way, or how could we do this?" And it all sort of blasted off. So I had this luxury of being connected to University of California, Irvine, who were doing the study through, and that sort of set it off. But really, it came down to the fact that I want answers too. Right. I don't want it to be a blame game. I don't want it to be pointing fingers. There's a lot of questions about healthcare and its integrity and its efficacy and all the things we have, the problems. I want to empower doctors, the very compassionate and great physicians that I work with. They don't have the tools. They weren't taught about weed in college, just like Megan and I. They weren't necessarily consumers. They don't know, and so they're just trying to do their best. We need to give them more tools, and so that's why we started developing this survey.
Got it. Well, the tools is definitely a part of it. Cody, I know that you're working on something really important that to me kind of dovetails into this whole discussion, and we'll wrap up this episode with that, which is the American for Safe Access stuff that you're working on. Give us a quick background of that and tell us why it's important to you.
Yeah, Americans for Safe Access was founded in 2002, and since that time, they've been fighting for medical cannabis rights. If you go back to California in the early 2000s, ASA was helping create phone trees to help stop the DEA raids or to give everyone information. They've sued the DEA multiple times. They've been involved. They want patients to have access to this medicine. Unfortunately, the DEA, the FDA, they've continued to stonewall, and it still becomes a challenge. I came into ASA just this 2024, where I became a member of the board of directors. And what we're advocating for and what we're trying to change is to make sure that patients are considered. And we've got evidence that patient first in this climate, in this country, works. And if we want to push change ahead, I believe that we need to push patients first, and that would be the Trojan horse that can get us there. At Americans for Safe Access, we're proposing a new schedule for cannabis, right? Right now it's a Schedule 1, which means highly addictive and no medical use, which is laughable. And then you've got fentanyl at 2, methamphetamine at 2, cocaine at 2, but cannabis remains number 1. We know we have evidence. So ASA is proposing the Medical Cannabis and Cannabinoid Act, where we're trying to create a new schedule for cannabis. And at first, you're going to be skeptical. I know you just heard me. You're like, we don't need to schedule it. It's just a plant. I hear you. But take a second and hear me out. If we take it off the schedule, that doesn't assure us that it's a medicine. It doesn't assure our patients protections. If we keep it, we make a new schedule, we take it away from the DEA, we take it away from the FDA, we can actually protect patients, make sure they have access, and start to create a better network. And in that same swoop, in the MCCA, we release all cannabis prisoners. We would propose that never in the future can you create a criminal law about cannabis. You can make civil suits. Yeah, you can't grow it without a license, or you can't sell it without a license. Do what you got to do, regulate it. But no more people going to jail for cannabis, which is one of our big pushes as well. So if you're interested in what I'm talking about, cannabis reform on a national level, you want to get involved, you want to support, you want to know how to support, you can reach out to me. You're going to see all my stuff in the show notes. I'm all over the internet, y'all, in a good way. So reach out to me, talk to me about it.
Yeah, this is the thing about it, right? So during your guys' episode, it's going to be 2 weeks of heavy tagging. Everyone's going to see you, hear you. We want them to hear these clips because that's what we're talking about. Megan, from your perspective, what would you add to that discussion?
Not a whole lot. Cody knows his stuff. I think that is definitely, I wish more people in the industry would be on board with it. It seems very like this, like Cody, posts about it and everybody's like, no, deschedule or bust.
Well, that's what Sean said. We need to herd the sheep into an idea of like, how do we actually move us forward instead of waiting for the feds to give us what we're given.
Again, you want to wait for the federal government. I'd rather play with a blindfold on and run through traffic. I mean, it just isn't something that's in my nature of humanality. But Megan, I think one of the things that you're always talking about that I see from you that I really appreciate is just about the patient advocacy. The way you talk about what people should have. And I'll be honest with you, the suppository stuff is wild. Like it's absolutely wild to me, but it goes into what Cody's saying, which is safe access for patients to understand. So thank you again for the work that you do in that realm and how you're addressing the female side of the issues as well as something. Again, these were like those two issues alone, like 10 years ago, is not even something that I think anyone would talk about on the internet. And I'm just so glad that you're willing to sort of shed all of that and just put up what is true to you. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Yeah.
You're the best. Well, you two have been absolutely outstanding. This couldn't have gone better for us as a collective. And I hope people really hear this on the CHS discussion, that if you're not educated, find Cody, find Megan. There are resources. There are people who genuinely want to help you. And as an industry, you're never going to get anything accomplished if you try to do it one faction at a time. You never will. It will always just spin your wheels. Don't worry about deschedule, reschedule. How about a new schedule? How about that? How about something that says, no, it doesn't even apply. We're something different. And I think that's a lot to work with. Cody, Megan, awesome. Thank you guys so much. You've been absolutely excellent. And as always, thank you, Fat Nugs Magazine, for sponsoring today's episode. We love you. We've shown off our our magazines throughout. Everyone has them. Everyone, see what I mean? Everyone has them. Everyone loves them. And don't forget, as Cody said, right now, we're trying to focus on the prisoner part of this. And Fat Nugs Magazine, they are making it happen with their Prisoner's Edition. They partner with Beard Brothers, Freedom Grow, and Jail for Weed in probably the most important edition of this magazine. If you're not involved, get there. If you still have time when this airs, I'm not positive if you will. It's $250 to get involved and be a part of this. I suggest brands do it. We did it. We're a part of it. We hope you do the same. Thank you both.
And I
for
love
joining
Fat
us.
Nugs magazine, y'all. Just to give my personal endorsement, a Fat Nugs Friday I love their art. I love how they're really speaking to the culture and what it needs to be. We are so fractured. We have 39 different states. And from a culture perspective, kind of like I'm trying to do from a regular perspective, from a culture perspective, Fat Nugs is nailing it.
They are. They really are. Thank you both for your time. We really appreciate it. As always, remember, we're here to remove the stigma and uplift this plant to its rightful place in our society. Thank you both for joining me. We will see you
Thanks for having us
next week. Thanks a lot.
Appreciate you.